So who was going to tell me that the World's Qualifying Series was not going to happen in North America? Hmm? Hello and welcome to Vision Denial and World Watch. My name is Sam, and if you're new to here, I watch every single playoff game from every region, for whatever it may be called, just in hopes for when the World Championships will be coming in, we'll have a better thought or better look at how everything is going. So far, every single region has started. The LEC is with us, and oh boy, the quality between those region is on top of the fact that we find out, as a matter of fact, not that long ago, the World's Qualifying Series is now happening the day before Worlds. But first, before we go on, for the playoff series that we are covering, we're going to be covering the 18th to the 20th of August, a total of 14 best of fives. To cover within this particular go. If you want to see all of the best of fives that I've covered beforehand, before I put them in the weekly videos, I have a link to my TikTok down below. Without further ado, as we discuss the kerfuffle that is the new formats that Riot likes to implement, and much more, let's get started. And we're back with PCS's lower bracket round one. We've got the LCOs from Oceania, Chief Esports versus Frank Esports. And honestly, after two splits, I can say that the LCO should just not have ever, they should either have their own slot at Worlds or just not be in the PCS playoffs. We can't be in this middle ground. The Chiefs had a solid understanding of their win conditions and how to approach the early game, but no leads were ever ballooned, leaving Frank full reign to do whatever they wanted in the safety that their gold would balloon just naturally. Now, Frank, for their part, are more coordinated in general, but the lazy nature of this series really shone a light when they were forced to go to a Game 4. That's when I saw the actual approach that Frank Esports would have, which is against especially a team from the PCS, which was stronger neutral approaches, some chaotic map movements, a little bit overzealous in some of the approaches and dives, but regardless of it all, high tempo. The pace was super interesting, and after 3 games of almost practical apathy against the Chiefs, they showed up to a late game that couldn't be played. My MVP of the series is Kenny-chan, who applied the most amount of consistent pressure around the map. God, who thought this was a good idea? And we're back with Korea's LCK's lower bracket semi-final. It's also a rematch within the telecom war. These are great. We got ourselves KT Rolsters versus T1, and congratulations to T1 on being the 9th team to qualify for Worlds. Granted, I don't think KT will take long to be the next LCK team to qualify. Both teams gave us quite a bit of a heart attack for a series, and one that is also a little frustrating. Both are World's caliber in different ways, but have these little things that kind of hold them back and are a little concerning. For T1, their approach to early game advantages and tempo always allow them to pull up off some macro plays that are really hard to contest, but wind up overforcing their hands on occasions, allowing opponents to come back, while KT holds solid understanding on how to balloon their leads and really choke out their opponents, but if none are found, it's usually a series of reckless plays that follow. Both have great coordination and understanding of how to close out their games, which is why we wound up with this kind of 5-game series with a bunch of mistakes that were followed and properly capitalized on. But in the advent of Faker healing and improving rapidly, T1 took the slight edge here. My MVP of the series is Gumayusi, who saved the series in the 1v2 play at the base at Game 5. Really consistent. And we're back with Southeast Asia's PCS lower bracket round 2. We got Deep Cross Gaming versus CTBC Flying Oysters. Now, first things first. Deep Cross, you need to drop Mission. His champion pool is just too small. When you can spend 3 bands and that's done. His pool sucks. Now, for the rest. Neither team is world's caliber. Shocker. Sure, you can find nice moments of coordination and vision play here and there, but neither team was able to properly balloon leads, use their advantages to further any macro plays, or even close out a game. An hour-long game where neither side is able to close out when they have Baron or Elder is a terrible look. Regardless of whoever the Flying Oysters will face off next, I do not see a situation in which they manage to make the finals and secure a slot at Worlds. The draft adaptations is kind of wonky, the coordination inconsistent at best, the macro choices are all over the place. It's really rough. My MVP for the series goes to Shun, again for the Vayne play, because I can't really justify giving MVPs for anyone's play in this series. And we're back with Vietnam's VCS's upper bracket round 2. We got ourselves Saigon Buffaloes versus GAM Esports. Now, over aggression and lack of aggression often fall under the same kinds of issue, either the lack of understanding of how to control the pace and ballooning leads efficiently. Both teams showed equal aspects of this issue, leading to some generally bizarre mistakes and desperations, especially out of the Buffaloes, because the Buffaloes generally had stronger vision and neutral approach, but whenever a lead would be had, it seemed like they were content with the very little that they would hold, which is a big problem given the style of drafts that GAM tend to go for. Now, while GAM isn't much better in the department of ballooning leads per se, at least the style of drafts they chose allowed them some wiggle room with scaling options presented. GAM, for their part, seem to be playing by the seams of their drafts and coordination dominance, which can only help so far if your aggression is properly tempered, which sometimes it's not. And honestly, GAM tends to be a world caliber team, but the lack of vision, proper neutral approaches, and general sloppy micro choices leaves me questioning how they would do in the international scene. My MVP of the series is Slater, whose general performance left the Buffaloes kind of blown away. And we're back with EMEA's LEC finals playoffs. We got ourselves in the first one, round 1, upper bracket, XL versus Mad Lions, and congratulations to Mad Lions on being the 10th team to qualify for Worlds. Now, there is something magical about the way that Mad won this series. There are some early game issues to be had, but as they never fell too far behind, they would find some map pressures and advantages to out-macro XL. Both teams hold some strong coordination and vision, and it was clear that XL really focused on neutral play and how to gain advantages from there. Mad recognized that and really went full force on creating chaos around the map. And it was clear that it was fairly planned out chaos to minimize losses and maximize how much they would gain, how much would be gained around the map. Now, XL never really ballooned any of the leads that they would make early game, making this fairly easy for Mad. And when Mad had a lead, it became clear how well planned out they were for this kind of play from the start. Now, even as Mad Lions qualify, I find it hard to say that they are world's caliber, but it's very close. I just kind of want to see how they approach their next series and hopefully avoid early deficits and so many weird and silly micro errors. My MVP of the series is Niski, who was chief implement in the macro map play Mad had. And we're back with Brazil's CBLOL's lower bracket round 2. We've got ourselves Vivo Starz versus INTZ. There's a level of frustration to be had when you can tell teams have practiced most of their game around neutral objectives, and that's about it. From the lack of side lane management, weird inconsistent vision application, and an insistence on only using neutrals to move the game forward. On too many occasions, either team would have the waves ready to push for a potential close to the game, numbers advantage, everything and anything, and instead barreled straight to Baron or Elder and still prove unable to close a game. Top it all off, both teams create drafts that make their lives incredibly hard, from either awkward engage or terrible frontline or non-existent frontline or win conditions that require side lane control or any kind of control that is not neutral objective, but never playing towards those. Neither team here is really equipped to play at Worlds, nor do I even expect INTZ to make it past the next round. My MVP for the series is Nosferus for the amount of pressure and space he created for his team. And we're back with North America's LCS lower bracket semifinals. We've got ourselves Team Liquid versus NRG. Now, what happens when you have a team that knows how to find leads in a very unique way, solidly coordinated, and plays with incredible vision, but fumbles frequently when they don't quite know how to balloon their leads or even find a lead when behind? Could you tell which team I was talking about? Me neither. When watching this series, it was always a question of, does NRG survive long enough to even get an angle for the win, or does Team Liquid find the pace to end the game fast enough to justify the lead they got? Now, NRG are more consistent in the late game, Team Liquid early game monsters. Neither team aspire confidence as they head to Worlds, as their weaknesses overlap, but for different stages of the game, which is really fascinating. Now, I prefer teams that know how to navigate the late game over those who struggle, or those who know how to play with early game but struggle past the mid game. But both equally struggle still to close out games or even play out the map when leads are had. That honestly, I could see any team take the better of them. My MVP of the series is Contracts for the amount of work he put in getting his team set up. And we're back with Korea's LCK's Grand Finals and a rematch. We got T1 versus Gen.G, the two most successful teams of all time. And they're also two incredibly scary teams. But people will have to fear Gen.G's approach as they go into Worlds. Now, firstly, the actual scoreline for this series, kind of weird. T1 does something very unnoticeable that will cause a lot of issues for most of the teams going to Worlds. They nullify leads even when even creating leads while not holding the pace of the game. And that is a skill that I don't think any other team around the world really has. The fact that Gen.G can consistently take leads, push them further and further, and remain consistent throughout the series is fantastic, even in the face of T1, who keeps grabbing back resources where they shouldn't, is something to be really wary of if you're going to be facing either teams. Without a doubt, both are Worlds contender, with Gen.G being particularly scary. Now that said, I do have some concerns with how both teams would like to skip some steps during the late stages of the games, making a lot of leads that they would hold mute, but this is more of a recurring hiccup than the actual norm of their play. Do I think that Gen.G is the front runner to win it all? I'm hesitant to say yes, but they are for sure in the top 4 teams heading to Worlds. My MVP of the series is Peanut, who enabled this team so aggressively the tempo of the series lived and died by him. And we're back with Southeast Asia's PCS's lower bracket round 2. We got ourselves J-Team versus Frank Esports. Quite honestly, the fact that Frank is more proactive at all stages of the game should be a strong indicator of why the series went the way that it did. I would like the way that J-Team set up for vision and neutrals to be matched with a proactive approach and not the assumption that our opponents are just going to just flop at drivers' constant pressure. Never once has any of the leads from them been used to garner anything, nor do they do anything but wait for mistakes from Frank to get actually anything in this series. Now, Frank won off of proactive plays, but much of it was rushed and took way too long to close out many of the games. Game 3 being the large exception, and if that had been a game where they couldn't close out a game with a 13,000 gold lead, it would have been really bad. Neither team scream world's caliber, but Frank at least demonstrated why proactivity should be the go-to in the play of these games. My MVP of this series is Solo Kill for his subtle shutdown of Driver this series, completely killing any proper win conditions J-Team usually relies on. And we're back with Japanese LJL Grand Finals and a rematch. We got ourselves Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming versus Detonation FocusMe, and congratulations to Detonation FocusMe on being the 11th team to qualify for Worlds. Now, Detonation FocusMe is really their own worst enemy. Briefly on the Hawks, their play on the whole is the closest I've seen a team in the LJL challenge Detonation on a macro scale. Better vision approach, solid early game to get win conditions going, but once that is over, their play becomes rather stock standard instead of approaching their win conditions to the end. Detonation, for their part, are a team with a lot of prep and an incredible amount of coordination, kind of uniquely so. I would rather their vision remain consistent during the game, but when setting up for neutrals and team fights, they are excellent. Like I mentioned, they can be their worst enemy with some overzealous approach and overall questionable micro decisions that slow down their progress, but we all knew that Detonation has been world's caliber, at least for the LJL, and it's only a matter of if they can keep it up or choke when under pressure. Consistency is where it counts. My MVP of this series goes to Yutapon, who knows how to create space and isolate targets in the most baffling ways, even a bit to the detriment. People are just not ready for his role swap to the top lane. And we're back with Vietnam's VCS's upper bracket round 2. We got Team Wales versus Team Secret, bunch of teams. Now, what happens when a team shows up and does almost nothing for 3 games straight? That's right, you get Team Wales. Granted, there is not much of a difference between these two teams on a skill basis. Both have fairly solid vision play, awkward neutral approaches, decent coordination. On the surface, either team moving forward would be fine. But, again, Team Wales seemed like they were expecting Team Secret to just make a bunch of mistakes and have the chance to play off of those. Meanwhile, Team Secret solidly find time to balloon leads, slowly but surely, and close out games where needed. Now, I say slowly, mostly because it's a little deceptive at times. Their games are not so long that I think much is needed to be changed from their playstyle from this position. But teams that play with a higher pace with leads that were developed at the rate that Team Secret were would challenge them a lot more in that position. I would say that this team is world's caliber with this kind of performance, but I do want to see how they fare against GAM in the qualifying series for the upper bracket semifinals. My MVP of the series is Hero02, who constantly kept looking for angles to get Team Secret ahead. And we're back with EMEA's LEC's round 1 upper bracket, Team BDS versus G2 Esports. And congratulations to G2 on being the 12th team to qualify for Worlds. Although, I feel kind of uneasy about it. Now, G2 is historically one of the most flexible teams internationally, but with some unorthodox approaches. Nothing in this series gave me confidence that either one of these teams would be world caliber. Both understood neutral approaches and had excellent vision play, but when it came down to their win conditions, when and where to apply pressure, closing out games, and especially drafting, one of the worst I've seen from this region, which is usually a really good region for this, there's a lot left to be desired. Now, I do see glimmers of hope here and there. Once a lead is established, both teams know how to increase tempo and understand how to punish efficiently, but that's the thing. It was rare for me to see either team gain advantages solely on their priority and mostly on just the reckless defense or lack of attempt of a defense from the opponents that really did the trick for each team. Now, we'll see in their upcoming series if this changes. I really hope it does. But for now, my MVP for this series is Hansama, who was the most consistent player out of G2, properly upkeeping damage. And we're back with Brazil's CBLOL upper bracket semifinal. We got ourselves Pain Gaming versus Loud, a recurring rivalry. Now, Loud at every playoffs improves their play little by little. The kind of control they had in regards to vision, tempo, coordination, neutrals, all of it was very nice to watch. Pain, for their part, seemed to struggle on how to adapt game to game. Now, I don't think there's a big skill difference. The adaptation was the larger difference between the two, but the scoreline would indicate otherwise. But for a fact, Pain was matching blow for blow until the breaking points of every single game. Because neither side is particularly excellent at increasing the pace of a game or ballooning leads, it is mostly controlling the ones that had already been garnered. And for that, this is why I hesitate to say that either of these teams would be Worlds caliber. Loud show that they want to increase their tempo, but it's clear from the fumbles from their attempts that they did have from that point that they don't have that part quite down yet. So, my MVP for the series is Tinones for the chaos and space he created for his team to maneuver. It's really kind of fun. And we're back with North America's LCS Grand Finals and a rematch. We got ourselves Cloud9 versus Gen.G. Quite frankly, some tempered aggression, some constant tempo. For the most part, both teams showed some solid signs of proper ballooning of leads, increasing the tempo of the game, solid vision, incredible coordination, and a fantastic understanding of their win conditions especially. I have some concerns on how Gen.G close out their games, taking a little longer than they need to in a lot of approaches. I also have some concerns of how Cloud9 in general play out some of their early to mid game situations in which they don't have leads, finding hard times bouncing back into the game. But for the most part, both teams show some solid Worlds contender, they are good Worlds contenders for North America. Just not quite top 8 material. The lack of consistency for how leads are gained and how to close out game give me enough doubt that neither of them are likely to reach that high at Worlds. But they're solid representatives for North America. My MVP of the series is Contracts, whose early aggression really cemented the win conditions that Gen.G were gunning for and needed for their drafts to work. Oh boy. Some of the teams from Europe or EMEA are kind of all over the place. Some good consistency, some not so good. Granted, that's the same for a lot of the regions that are not Korea or the LPL. I think I've mentioned this already, that the quality of them is not to its standard compared to everybody, to the top 2 regions. But, that's not much new in the realm of the international scene. What is new, however, is the grand total amount of fuckery, just for a lack of a better word here, of the LoL Esports team. You do not announce at the start of the year that things are going to be played out in North America. I think this was a complete and total lack of oversight at this point. There was clear knowledge of how late into the year that the LEC's playoffs were going to be, and I think they realized that if both teams that are going to be participating have the situation where, oh, cool, one of them was won, now they have to make visas go for them. Why wasn't this thought through at the beginning? Right? Heck, they could have just had whoever team loses immediately the 4th slot just heads off right after the LEC is done. That's literally going to be in the 2nd week. Yeah, in September 3rd. There's still a huge amount of time that exists for it. And now they did say in their announcement, read the article if you can. I'll also link the article down below regarding the situation, that They had originally planned for it to be in North America, but in the wording here it says we're both for seeds, best of 5 clan final play-in slot. Originally hosts the World Qualifying Series in North America, we've elected to move the event to South Korea to allow the two potential teams as much time as possible to prepare in the host region, minimize travel, and scrim against qualified world teams before the play-in stage. Now, the thing that annoys me more than anything else is that there are completely different scenarios that could have existed in terms of like where this last seed was going to go. Again, I would have loved it if they gave it to the PCS. But because we're not there, here's some of the actual benefits. Because as much as I would have rathered this not be the thing at all, a benefit from this is that many people have question marks over like the actual like what the meta is going to look like going forward. And given that it's happening the day before Worlds, we'll actually have a purview of the Worlds patch and what expectations are in a best of 5 format. Because in best of 1 and best of 3 scenarios, the meta itself is really elusive. It's hard to actually pin down what works and what is just kind of a fluke or like I hate the term, but a cheese strategy. And so I think this will permit a nice groundwork, for lack of a better term, I guess, to settle some expectations as to what actually will work on the international scene. Europe and North America tend to be the like forefront of the strategy and the pick and ban side of the meta during Worlds. The LPL and the LCK don't have to really like think too hard. Not that they don't think, but like they don't have to like really overforce the minutia and the limits of what the meta is, while as the LEC and the LCS do. And so it's going to be fun to see the two regions who put the most thought usually in their drafts show us what their expectations are. The other thing, I have mentioned in past videos the concern that I had about the ability for some of the teams to keep up or to compete head-to-head. The more recent series that I've watched give me less of a concern overall. Now, duh, but let's be realistic. If this level of quality is usually not consistent throughout, which for many of the top teams and many of the like expected favorites going in have been throughout, and the peak of your performance is leveled for the finals, my question becomes, why were you playing worse against worse teams and only playing the best against the best team of your region? That is a genuine question to the scenario. Because if you go then and you're effectively a wild card against anybody else, like, what's the point? Why would you send a team who's likely going to get dunked on by a team that's qualified as being worse than them and only sometimes competitive against a team that's higher? The new format does not allow for like any room of error against anybody. But even with the LEC series, in which I was a little apprehensive by some of the performance and quality, there is a clear direction and sense from all of the regions that things are tightening up, that they're actually getting their shit together. And I can appreciate that. And hopefully it'll come out ahead at the World's Qualifying Series. Those are my thoughts, at least for the day. I'd love to hear everything that you have to think about. I appreciate any and everyone who watches these. They're greatly appreciated. It's always a fun time to do this. I would love to hear what have been your favorite series, your least favorite series that you're really looking forward to. any and everything down below. What do you think about the kerfuffle and kind of like weird scenario that is the World's Qualifying Series? All of your thoughts would be greatly appreciated in the comment section down below. Thank you again for watching. Have a good one.